Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm chatting with Joe Sexton, who just joined a company that we have been talking about a little bit on this channel called Plurilock. Now, Joe is somebody that we are really excited to see get involved with the company because he formerly worked for CrowdStrike as a board member back when they only had $25 million of revenue. And he also worked for McAfee, which ultimately turned into an acquisition by Intel north of $7 billion. Joe's background in cybersecurity is all about go-to-market strategy and helping companies scale up their customer base based on having a product that adds value to consumers. So we thought it was really exciting news when he chose to get involved with Plurilock. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Joe, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
So lately, it seems like cybersecurity is more of a conversation than it's ever been. And obviously that has a lot to do with what happened with CrowdStrike a couple of weeks ago. And normally when we have guests on, I don't ask them about their background because it's really not necessarily that relevant. But I look at some of the boards you've sat on, and I feel like you've got a really interesting sort of backstory in the in the industry when it comes to cybersecurity. So what can you tell us about how you kind of got to where you are today and some of the companies you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, I think my first kind of adventure into cybersecurity was with McAfee. And I joined there. Dave DeWalt was the CEO. George Kurtz actually was the CTO, who's now CEO of CrowdStrike. And when I joined, it was about a $1.2 billion business, enterprise and consumer. And I was on the enterprise side, eventually ended up running worldwide sales for them. But from my perspective, I couldn't spell security if you spotted me SEC. I wasn't a security expert. But what I am pretty good at is taking solutions and applying them towards problems, and especially as it relates to, does it generate value for an enterprise? Because that's why people buy technology. They don't buy it for features and functions. They buy it to solve problems and drive business outcomes. And at McAfee, we were able to do that. So when I first joined there, we were number two by quite a margin to Symantec in the enterprise market. And what we did is we focused on the current product they had, which was a product called EPO, which brought together all the agents into a single screen. And we were able to go to the market and our customers and show them how that was a better business value outcome for them than Symantec, because Symantec had a bunch of agents and hard to manage, that kind of stuff. So we actually applied kind of a business approach to it and ended up catapulting from number two to number one. When I left there, the business had doubled to $2.5 billion. Intel acquired us for $7.7 billion. And my learnings there was, even though security is technical in nature, I get that, and I'm not a technical guy. I do believe that in the world of technology, business rules. And as a matter of fact, there's a thing I did with all my sales reps there. Had a couple thousand of them there at the end. I made them put on the back of their business card, have we proved our value today, with a question mark. And a lot of the reps were like, why do you want us to do that? And I said, because I want you to be able to answer that question. They're not buying our technology for technology's sake. They're buying it for a business outcome. And so from there, after Intel acquired us, I left and did a startup, AppDynamics, which had a really successful outcome. When I joined there, it was about $12 million in revenue. Fast forward almost 4 years later, that company got acquired for $3.7 billion by Cisco, and we were doing close to $300 million. So it was an incredible growth story. Same thing applied. We took a technology solution that was really good, applied business, outcomes against it with prospects and customers, and really got on a growth spree that ended up being good for the employees, for the shareholders, and so forth. And then as part of being on the AppDynamics leadership team, George Kurtz, and asked me to come in and join the CrowdStrike board. And they were about 25 million at the time. I mean, today they're probably about 3 billion in top line ARR. And the reason why he did it was, look, he understood that they had some fantastic technology, but he also saw what we were able to do at McAfee when we were together. And so I came in and we took that from when I left, they were doing about $1.7 billion. And I was on that board for 8 years. I chose to leave to go and help another security company, Aqua, which I'm on the board of that company currently, as well as Menlo is another security company that I currently sit on the board of. But the same thing applies. I mean, I think whether it's security or an AppDynamics case, it was application performance management. I did a stint at Mercury where it was testing, and Computer Associates, which it was infrastructure. The same philosophy applies, and that is you've got to be able to find what is the business outcome you're going to drive for a prospect or a customer that has business value. And that answers, the third most important question. There's three questions why people buy things. Why buy anything? You got to, make sure you've got a problem you can agree on, you've got a potential to solve. Then why buy you? What makes you unique? But the most important is why buy now? And that's where a lot of companies fall short because they spend so much time with the technology and so forth. You got to have a business case that has been bought into by the prospect or the customer, if it's an upsell or cross sell, to cause them to do a transaction with you in the moment. And that's usually the hardest one to do. And that's one where I try to help companies solve.
So just kind of hearing about your approach to sales, I mean, you've managed some pretty big sales staffs and had quite a bit of success, it sounds like. I find it interesting when you say that you'd put on their cards, have we provided value today for a customer? Would you guys often think about taking solutions back to the operations team or the product team and say, hey guys, we need you guys to do this because this is going to make more sense for the customers? Or how would that work for you guys if there was a gap there between the solutions that you guys were selling and the feedback that the sales staff were getting?
Yeah, I've worked for some really good CEOs, and the ones that are really good and get it understand that the tip of the spear is sales. And what I mean by that is, that's where you get your feedback in terms of what are customers actually wanting to buy versus, what's just a cool feature. And there's a couple things that I've seen during my career that helps with that. Number one is taking people from R&D and rotating them out in the field. At Mercury, for example, we used to take R&D people all the way from Israel, fly them into the North American territories, and have them spend a week with customers. And they were amazed a lot of times at what customers had done with a product versus what they thought they would do. The real world, customers use a solution in different ways to solve, different problems that an R&D person never even dreamed of, but a customer figured out. So being able to take R&D people in the real world was helpful. Also, salespeople, you had to have, and you still do, you have to have good product managers. So there has to be a liaison between R&D and sales, because salespeople, a couple things. They're naturally optimistic. Just go ahead and build this feature. It's not hard, right? And the famous last words. And then the second thing is, if you're not careful, salespeople will carry back what a customer wants, which may be features that he already has. And so I had a brilliant person. His name was Bhaskar at AppDynamics, and he told me one time, this always resonated with me. He was our product manager, CTO, so to speak. And his job was 50% to take what customers wanted and thought they needed and put into the product, and 50% of features they didn't know they needed because they didn't know they were possible. So having a good product manager or a liaison in between sales and R&D is crucial to be able to do that translation in terms of what customers really need and what customers really need, but they just don't know. Because they don't know it's possible. They haven't really thought about that yet. If you can get a good combination of the two, you can be cooking on all cylinders.
When we're talking about the cybersecurity world, what's sort of the area where you see the most room for growth right now? Like, I assume that you've seen the big products that are out there and what's sort of resonating and what has its challenges. from your view, where's the most growth potential right now, or like the sort of holy grail to unlock by a cybersecurity company?
Well, I still think cybersecurity has, tons of room to grow. The hardest part in the security world now is how do you become a blade of grass in the lawn, right? So, in other words, how do you stand out? Because there's a lot of security startups, there's a lot of security, I would call them features that may end up being a product, but typically will either go away or get acquired. How do you stand out? So I think there's a lot of room to grow. I can tell you one of the biggest challenges in cybersecurity is talent. Um, the big companies don't attract the best talent, and I'm talking about big enterprise customers, so to speak. That's why startups and cybersecurity companies do so well because they do attract that world class talent. Because if you're really good at what you do, you want to be part of an exciting startup and a chance to do an IPO and all those things that come with it. So I do think the area of security talent is a challenge, and a lot of growth will be impeded, by companies not being able to provide that. That's one of the things I love about Plurilock is they have some of that world class talent that can unlock some of the capabilities and potential from security solutions and some of these big customers. AI is one of those things. I find it almost humorous. I think there'll be this food fight for the next few years. I do think some of the bigger guys will win out. It's going to come down to how people can use it in the real world to solve real world problems. And again, back to that drive value from those business outcomes. There'll be a ton of technology. People get excited, but not really do a good job of showing what value it provides. They'll go by the wayside. Still too early to tell who the big winners are going to be, but I think some of the bigger companies are already starting to adopt it. You see Microsoft and Google, and you'll see the CrowdStrikes and some of the big ServiceNows. The big companies will figure out how to incorporate it in their products and drive value from it. Big AI companies, still too early to tell which one's going to be the big winners versus the also rans.
So you mentioned Plurilock, a company who we have a large position in, and that's obviously why we're grateful that you're taking the time to chat with us today. What about Plurilock caught your attention? And I know, like most of the companies you worked for in the past are pretty large, successful cybersecurity companies, and here you've come in to sort of help out this tiny little micro cap out of Canada. What is it that caught your attention about this company?
Well, I think there's a couple things. Having spent quite a bit of time with Ian and so forth. Kind of the mission statement is intriguing to me. This whole mission around, especially as it relates to chip companies and the whole chip industry, which I think is the linchpin to a lot of worldwide economy and worldwide technology capabilities. Keeping those kind of companies secure. That mission, I think, is interesting to me, and I think a lot of the resources you're seeing brought to bear that are joining to help Plurilock, have extensive kind of background and knowledge to do well and help in that area. I think that a lot of the resources that Plurilock has in terms of the services, that critical services component, people who are cleared, top secret, and there's different levels of top secret security. I think that's interesting and will get Plurilock into places with a lot of the companies they work with that other companies can't go to. There is some technology. I'm not, the best at explaining it, but there's some AI technology as it relates to capabilities in a security area. Best way I can describe it is, you get up and leave your PC. You forget to log out. I mean, it looks at behavior and so forth and does some things. I think that's an interesting technology Plurilock has that is, I believe, either been patented or in the process of being patented. And I think I can help Plurilock get that into some of my companies' customer bases and expand that in a rapid fashion. So there's several elements, I think. I like the team. I like Ian. I think there's tremendous upside in terms of what the future holds for Plurilock.
So Plurilock, it's something we hear about a little bit when we talk to management, is that it's a platform as opposed to sort of maybe we'll just say sort of an individual application. What is it that they mean by that when they say Plurilock is a platform?
Well, I think, versus as I was saying, you come in with just a point solution or one solution that fits all. Um, it's not realistic. I think you got to be able to come into a prospect, ascertain in terms of what the problems are and what solutions they need, and it's a combination of both products and services. Hence the ability to bring to bear various software companies because of the kind of the line card that Plurilock represents, and then supplementing those with world-class critical services. I think you can bring those two to bear and provide the best solution over and above just a pure play software company or a pure play services company. That's the platform in my mind. It's bringing to bear a solution to a problem, no matter what that problem is. You're not limited.
Now, my understanding when we're talking about critical services, we're talking about, if I'm understanding correctly, the ability to service a large enterprise company, and that really just boils down to having great people to be able to do it properly. Is that
Correct? Correct. They're very, very hard to find. They're highly sought after, and Plurilock has done kind of an amazing job of getting more than their fair share. I think the mission is attracts a lot of people. People in security. It's not just making money and so forth. I mean, I do think they're mission oriented. Every great security company I've been part of, whether it was McAfee or CrowdStrike or Aqua, Menlo, and others. I mean, everybody's got a mission statement, and they feel like they're making the world a better place in their own way. I know it sounds a little corny, but this whole chip protection thing in terms of that industry is tied directly into democracy, right? I mean, everybody knows what's going on with the chip manufacturers, for example, in Taiwan and so forth. So there's a bigger picture that comes along with being able to provide those solutions, and I think that mission is what attracts a lot of these world-class services folks.
Do you think that Plurilock's at a stage yet where it would be ready for a Nasdaq listing or an NYSE listing?
I think Nasdaq is probably closer than what people think. You know that would be up to Ian and the board and the team and so forth. But I think transitioning from a Canadian listing, nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot more visibility and so forth is available on Nasdaq, and that would probably be the most likely candidate if they were to change exchanges somewhere down the road. Just makes more sense because it's so technology heavy in terms of what the future may potentially hold.
Mm-hmm. The big challenge we see here in Canada is just there's not a lot of capital in the public markets like there used to be.
Right.
And so we hear this discussion happening all the time now where, we used to have somewhat independently strong junior markets here, the TSX and the venture. And it seems like now any company that has a good product, like we look at Plurilock, at one point they were trading at like 0.1 times sales. I think now they're like, they're still significantly less than 1 times. Whereas if we look at most cybersecurity companies, they're well north of that. Now I understand that we are talking about a bunch of our revenue, which I'm not exactly sure how you'd put a multiple on that. And I'm not sure if that's something you could speak to. But it certainly does seem like, as somebody who follows the Canadian junior markets, that getting on the Nasdaq for a company like this is where you're ultimately going to be able to attract the most amount of capital.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things Nasdaq brings. Liquidity, number one. So there's transactions and volume and so forth, as well as investors. I think it's just an order of magnitude more than the Canadian market. Valuation is always the size in terms of top line, the margin, and the growth rate. I mean, those three things are critical to that. So a lot of times until you're on a market that is looking for those kind of things and has the liquidity to go chase it, so to speak. I think it's probably a little limiting being in the Canadian market. I think eventually moving to Nasdaq would be a good outcome for Plurilock.
So, what are your objectives with the company in terms of what you'd like to accomplish as joining the company as an advisor?
Well, I think, my main focus, any company that I advise, and Plurilock in particular, is going to be to help them on their go-to-market side of the business, to make sure they can maximize the AI-enabled product that they, have themselves, to make sure they can maximize in terms of leveraging the critical infrastructure, critical security services, resources, to be able to bring to bear some world-class technologies to solve problems for their customers and prospects. And I'm always a big one on growth. It's not silly growth. It's not growth at any cost, but smart growth. And I think that Plurilock has tremendous upside ahead of it. And I've been pretty good and got a good track record in terms of helping companies realize their potential. And so, from a top line perspective, that's what I look to change and help with. There'll be other things in terms of the product themselves and so forth that R&D and so forth can be responsible for. But when it comes to go to market, that's my goal. See if we can maximize their potential, especially in what I'd call friendly countries. Countries, the United States and Canada, the Five Eyes for sure. Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain. And then if we can do that, I think the company's got tremendous upside and growth potential ahead of it.
When I look at some of the companies you're currently involved with, and I don't know if you can speak to this or are willing to speak to it, but it looks like Menlo Security could be synergistic with Plurilock. Are you thinking about synergies right now with any of the companies you're currently involved with and Plurilock, or is that?
Yeah, I am, because I think that there's some customer install and customer basis, so to speak, that could really benefit, especially as you look at government kind of side of the business. Government's a little different than commercial. I think there's tremendous potential and some large government customers that some of the companies I sit on the boards of have in place and can use both the services as well as the technology I was speaking about to leverage both Plurilock as well as their own customers. And obviously, if you can help a customer, bring in solutions, whether it's services, technology, or both, it's good for both. So it's good for the Plurilock side of the business as well as some of these companies that I help. If customers win, we all win. Yes.
So one other question I got for you is, if I'm thinking about this as an investor and I'm sort of interested in Plurilock, how much work typically goes into, let's just say that Plurilock was able to sign a big enterprise contract. Is that something that's going to require a tremendous amount of capital to get the product up and running, or is this sort of proven technology that could be kind of implemented without taking on a tremendous amount of capital to actually have a solution that fits a big enterprise?
I think they've got something right now. And I think the problem that a lot of small companies like Plurilock have is there's not enough reach. And to be able to accomplish that distribution, that would be expensive. But if you can leverage existing customer bases and bring to bear technology for customers who already trust, a vendor, I think that would be the approach I like to take. You minimize your spend and go to market if you can leverage those distribution channels.
I would assume, looking at your track record, that you get approached by a lot of small sort of cybersecurity startups, and you kind of pick and choose which ones you kind of entertain. What is it you look for if a company approaches you and asks you to get involved? What's sort of your key criteria that you want to see before you get involved with a company?
Yeah, there's three. The main one is the CEO. Is the CEO somebody that I feel like understands sales and the importance of the go-to-market side of the business? A lot of CEOs in this world, technology, are very technical, and they're convinced that the product wins on its own. I don't happen to subscribe to that same philosophy. So I got to have a CEO that kind of gets the fact you got to have great technology, but you also have to have superior go-to-market. I think the TAM, total addressable market, has got to be part of it. What's the potential? it's no good to be a big fish in a little pond. And security certainly has, a big pond. And then the product itself, it's got to work. It's got to do what you say it does. I always say that to people not in the business, and they kind of laugh. And the ones who are in the business don't, because they understand that, sometimes products look great, but they don't necessarily perform in the real world. So those three are the elements I look for before I, join a company.
Well, Joe, we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. As shareholders of Plurilock, we are really excited that you got involved with the company, and hopefully you'll come back on here after the company announces some pretty big transactions with your go-to-market strategy.
Steve, I'd love to, and it's been a lot of fun, and looking forward to a exhilarating ride together. So let's go change the world and make it a safer place.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks, everyone.